Oracle Trust Calibration is a Mnemosyne Research Institute series that uses chess to measure how large language models handle shaky context, misleading prompts, corrupted boards, and feedback that may not be trustworthy. Chess is perfect for this because every move can be checked and every position can be rebuilt. So when an AI loses contact with the truth, we can pinpoint exactly where it happens. Today's lesson is AI teacher versus AI teacher from the black side, with the focus on the London system classical setup main line. I'll start from 1d4 and build the position move by move, showing how this practical system works and how black should understand it. I play d4 to claim central space and start the most practical 1d4 setup, solid, flexible, and low theory. The London idea is that I'm aiming for the same grown-up structure almost every time. Bishop f4, e3, knight f3, c3, bishop d3, knight b d2, instead of memorizing 30 forcing lines. I play d5 for black to challenge the d4 pawn and stop white from getting an easy e4 center. This is the classical Queen's Gambit kind of reply. The nice London point is that I'm not worried. White can still go knight f3 and bishop f4, putting the bishop outside the pawn chain before e3 ever locks it in. I play knight f3, developing calmly and keeping the London move order flexible instead of committing to c4 like a Queen's Gambit. The knight supports d4 and I's e5, which becomes one of my main long-term pressure squares in this setup. The question I'm answering is, what if I skip the quiet London move order and play knight c3 early instead of saving that knight for knight b d2? That becomes the Jobava London, the aggressive cousin of the system, where I still want the bishop on f4, but I'm accepting a bigger structural commitment. The strategic trade-off is clear. I get faster piece activity and jumps like knight b5 or knight d6+, but I give up the classic c3 check d4 check 3 pyramid flexibility. The recurring idea to watch is that white plays for initiative first and comfort second. I play knight f6, developing the knight to its best square and adding firm control over e4 while supporting the d5 pawn. Against the London, I'm choosing the classical approach. Solid development first, then I'll challenge white's central pyramid rather than chase theory. I play knight c3, and this is the Jobava-style choice. The knight covers e4 and b5, supports a future knight b5 or knight d6+ jump, but it also commits me because I no longer have the quiet London pawn triangle with c3 available. A strong engine treats this as sound and roughly balanced. Material and king safety are normal, white's pieces are active, but black's counterplay against d4 becomes more serious because the c-pawn is blocked. The critical reply I'm watching for is c5, hitting my center immediately. If black strikes there, I usually continue with bishop f4 and e3, accepting a sharper position instead of the slow classical London structure. Next, I'm aiming for bishop f4, e3, bishop d3, and possibly knight e5 or knight b5, steering toward fast piece pressure rather than the grown-up, ultra-solid c3, check d4, check 3 London pyramid. I play g6, committing to a dark square fianchetto. The pawn controls f5 and h5, prepares bishop to g7, and challenges white's d4 center from the long diagonal instead of copying a normal London setup. Engine-wise, this is basically healthy for black. Material is equal, white has easy development and a more aggressive knight on c3, but I'm aiming for solid king safety, pressure on d4, and a structure where knight b5 or e4 must be answered accurately. The natural follow-up here is bishop g7 and castles kingside, because against the Jobava setup, I want to meet fast bishop f4, knight b5, and kingside ideas with calm central pressure. The punch I'm watching for is bishop f4 followed by knight b5, so I need to be ready with knight a6, c6, or sometimes knight e8 to blunt the jump rather than drifting into a fork on c7 or d6. Next, I expect white to choose bishop f4 or e3, and I'm steering toward a King's Indian Grunfeld-flavored London position where white attacks quickly, but I counter by hitting the center before the attack becomes free. I play bishop f4, bringing the bishop outside the pawn chain and putting direct pressure on e5, d6, and c7. In the Jobava version, that bishop plus knight on c3 creates quick jump threats like knight b5 and sometimes knight c7 or knight d6+ if black is careless. The engine reads this as roughly balanced with a small white initiative. Material is equal, black's king is safe for now, but white's minor pieces are more active while the c3 knight gives up the calmer London structure with c3, d4, e3. The punch I'm watching for is c5, black's best practical counter, hitting my d4 center before I get a free attack. If that comes, I'm ready to play e3, bishop e2, or take c5 depending on the timing, and steer into active piece play rather than a slow pyramid. Next, I expect black to choose bishop g7, castles kingside, or c5, and I'm aiming for e3, bishop d3, maybe h4, or knight b5, building the aggressive Jobava-style pressure instead of the quieter classical London setup. I play bishop g7, completing the kingside fianchetto and committing black to a solid dark square setup with quick castles kingside coming next. Concretely, the bishop on g7 sits on the long diagonal toward the center, and once the knight on f6 moves or the center opens, it will increase pressure on d4 and the queenside dark squares. A strong engine reads this as basically balanced. White has the more aggressive minor piece set up with knight on c3 and bishop on f4, but black has a healthy structure, safe king plan, and no real weaknesses yet. This is natural in the Jobava London because if white wants fast knight b5 or knight d6 plus ideas, I want my king tucked away and my bishop active before challenging the center with c5 or castles kingside. The punch I'm watching for is knight b5, hitting c7 and threatening knight c7 plus, so I need to be ready with castles kingside, knight a6 or c6 depending on the exact move order. Next I expect e3, queen d2 or knight b5, and I'm steering toward a position where white attacks quickly, but black undermines d4 with c5 and relies on the fianchetto bishop for long-term pressure. I play e3, locking in the d4 e3 center, defending the bishop on f4, and opening the bishop from f1 so I can develop with bishop d3 next. A strong engine reads this as roughly balanced. Equal material, both kings still need safety. White has the more active bishop on f4 and the aggressive knight on c3, but black has easy counterplay because my c-pawn is blocked and black can hit d4. This is the natural Jobava follow-up. I'm not building the classical London pyramid with c3. I'm building a faster attacking setup where bishop d3, h4, or knight b5 can come quickly. The punch I'm watching for is c5, striking my d4 pawn before I'm fully castled. If black plays that, I'm ready to meet it with bishop e2, knight b5 ideas, or take c5 depending on the tension. Next, I expect black to castle or play c5, and I'm steering toward a position with quick development, pressure on e5, and possible knight jumps to b5 or d6. I play castles kingside, putting the king on g8 and rook on f8, so my king is safe before white's Jobava ideas like knight b5, knight e5, or bishop h6 start landing. The engine reads this as roughly balanced. Material is equal, white has more aggressive piece placement, but black's fianchetto bishop on g7 and compact pawn structure give me very reliable defense. The move fits this line because, against the Jobava London, I don't want to argue immediately in the center before my king is tucked away. The punch I'm watching for is knight b5, aiming at c7 and d6. If white jumps in, I'm ready to meet it with knight a6 or c6 and steer toward a solid position where white's early knight c3 can become a target. I read this position as about equal to a small white pull. Material is level, black's king is already safer on g8, but my bishop on f4 and knight on c3 are active and ready for knight b5 or knight d6 plus ideas. Strategically, the Jobava setup is absolutely playable, but it is more committal than the main London because the knight on c3 blocks the usual c3 pawn support. The key takeaway is that knight c3 buys aggression and quick jumps but costs structural flexibility. If black calmly challenges the center with c5 or knight bd7 and e5, I can end up wishing my knight had gone to d2 instead. That's the contrast I wanted to show. So now I'm snapping back to the main London setup. Here I want to answer the critical anti-London question. What if black does not politely build with e6 but goes straight for the throat with c5? The strategic fight is simple. Black challenges my d4 center before my usual c3, e3, bishop d3 setup becomes completely comfortable. The recurring idea is pressure. Black hits d4, then often swings the queen to b6 to attack b2, forcing me to decide whether I can keep my system or must neutralize actively. This is the top-level equalizing method associated with players like Anish Giri and Fabiano Caruana, very direct, very theoretical, and if white handles it calmly, roughly equal. I play bishop f4, and this is the move that makes it the London system. I get the dark squared bishop outside the pawn chain before playing e3. The big practical point is that I avoid the Queen's Gambit bad bishop problem right away, and I'm heading for the same sturdy setup again and again. e3, c3, bishop d3, knight b d2. I play c5, immediately hitting the pawn on d4 and stopping white from getting the London pyramid for free. This is the most direct anti-London idea. I challenge the center before e3 and c3 make it rock solid, and I prepare queen b6 to attack b2. A strong engine reads this as roughly equal. Material is level, both kings are safe, and black's piece activity is good because I'm asking white to solve concrete problems instead of just setting up. The reply I'm watching for is queen b3 after my coming queen b6, offering a queen trade. If that happens, I accept that equal endgame direction, because this line is designed to neutralize the London quickly. I play e3, and concretely I'm reinforcing d4, controlling f4, opening the bishop on f1, and committing to the London pyramid with c3 likely coming next. A strong engine reads this as basically balanced. Material is equal, both kings are safe for now, my bishop on f4 is nicely developed outside the chain, but black's skipped e6 means the bishop on c8 is not bad, so black's minor pieces have a very healthy future. The reason e3 is natural here is that I don't chase space. I build the same grown-up London shell, keep d4 stable, and prepare bishop d3, castles kingside, knight b d2 and c3. The punch I'm watching for is queen b6, hitting b2 and adding pressure on d4, and my standard answer is queen b3, mirroring the queen and offering the trade instead of passively defending. If queens come off, I'm steering toward a clean, roughly equal endgame where my structure is solid but black has equalized more directly than in the normal London. I play knight c6, developing with tempo against white's center. The knight adds pressure on d4, controls e5, and supports the coming queen b6 hit on b2. A strong engine sees this as roughly equal. Material is level, both kings are safe, and black's active pressure with c5 plus knight c6 compensates for white's solid London setup. The critical thing I'm watching for is queen b3. If white mirrors my queen pressure, I'm happy to trade queens with queen b6 and steer into a clean, equal endgame where the London has been neutralized early. I play c3, locking in the London pyramid, pawns on c3, d4, and e3, with c3 defending d4 and taking b4 away from black's pieces. A strong engine reads this as basically equal. Material is level, both kings are safe for now, white is solid but a little cramped, and black's active c5 and knight c6 setup has already challenged my center more directly than in a quiet London. The reason c3 is natural here is that I'm accepting the system structure. I don't try to win the opening, I make d4 hard to break and prepare bishop d3, knight b d2, and castles kingside. The punch I'm watching for is queen b6, hitting b2 and increasing pressure on d4. My standard answer is queen b3, meeting queen pressure with queen pressure and offering a queen trade into an equal but very playable endgame. Next, I expect exactly that queen b6 idea, and if queens come off, I'm steering into a sturdy structure where my plan is slow development, control of e5, and only later kingside space with f4 to f5. I play queen b6, the principled anti-London move. I hit b2 immediately, support the pawn on c5, and make white prove the central pyramid can survive direct pressure. A strong engine reads this as roughly equal. White is solid, but black has active pieces, healthy central tension, and none of the usual passive London suffering. The critical reply I'm watching for is queen b3, mirroring the queen and offering a trade. If queens come off, I've steered toward the clean equalizing endgame that makes this line so respected. White plays queen b3. I read this position as basically equal. Material is level, neither king is safer yet. Black's queen on b6 and knight on c6 are active, while white has the solid c3, d4, e3 pyramid, but not much pressure. A strong engine would call this around equal, maybe only the tiniest white edge because white moves first. Strategically, this does not refute the London, but it is one of black's cleanest equalizers. By hitting d4 and b2 before playing e6, black forces me into queen b3 and often a queen trade. My takeaway is simple. When black plays early c5 and queen b6, I should not drift into automatic London moves. I must meet the queen pressure directly. Now I'm returning to the main line, where black plays the more classical setup, and I get to show the standard London plan. I play e6, a normal book move. I reinforce d5, open the bishop on f8, and build a classical Queen's Gambit style center. The teaching point is the trade-off. Black is solid, but the bishop on c8 is now stuck inside the pawn chain, while white's London bishop is already active on f4. I play e3, the quiet London move. I lock in the solid d4 e3 base, prepare bishop d3, and keep my setup independent of black's exact move order. The big teaching point is that this is a system opening, bishop already active on f4, then e3, c3, knight b d2, and I slowly build pressure on e5 from a very hard-to-crack structure. I play bishop d6, a normal book move, immediately challenging the bishop on f4. Black does not let white enjoy the London's good bishop for free. If white trades, I get clean development. If white retreats, I've gained a useful tempo toward castling and a solid classical setup. I play bishop g3, the standard London retreat. I preserve my good bishop outside the future c3, d4, e3 pawn pyramid instead of giving it up just because black challenged it. If black captures on g3, takes g3 gives me a useful semi-open h-file, and my plan stays simple. Bishop d3, c3, knight b d2, and pressure on e5. I play castles kingside, a normal book move, getting the king safe before challenging the London center with c5 or knight b d7 e5 ideas. From white's side, I don't panic or start memorizing theory. I keep the system going with bishop d3, c3, knight b d2, and steady pressure on e5. I play bishop d3, putting the light-squared bishop on the diagonal c2 to h7, and preparing to castle without changing my London structure. The key point is that my dark-squared bishop is already outside the pawn chain, so I get solid development without creating the usual QGD bad bishop problem. Here I'm answering the practical, anti-London question: what if black stops respecting the bishop on g3 and just tries to hunt it down? The strategic trade-off is clear. Black can eliminate my dark-squared bishop, but doing that often gives me an open h-file and sharper attacking chances. The engine usually reads this as roughly equal, but it's no longer the quiet London squeeze. King safety and piece activity start to matter immediately. The punch to watch for is whether black's bishop trade is a real achievement, or whether my rook suddenly gets a highway toward black's castled king. Now I play c5, black's clean central break. I challenge the d4 pawn before white completes the c3, check d4, check a3, London pyramid. The teaching point is simple. Against a system opening, don't drift. Hit the center early and make white prove the solid setup has real bite. A strong engine reads this as roughly equal. Material is balanced. Black's king is a little safer right now. Black has eliminated my London bishop, but I get the open h-file and a very solid c3, d4, e3 center in return. Strategically, knight h5 does not refute the London. It's a practical way for black to make the position sharper and less automatic, especially if I castle kingside without thinking. My takeaway is simple. When black chases the bishop with knight h5, I must notice the trade changes the whole character of the position. Fewer quiet London pressures, more h-file attacking chances, and dark square weaknesses to manage. That's the anti-London warning sign, and now I'm snapping back to the main line. I play c3, completing the London pyramid with pawns on c3, d4, and e3, slightly cramped but very hard to break. The big teaching point is that this is the system opening promise. I get the same sturdy setup again and again, and now if black captures on d4, I'm ready to recapture with the c-pawn and keep my center intact. I play knight c6, developing with tempo on the center. The knight adds pressure on d4 and fights white's favorite London square e5. Against the London, black's practical plan is not to win the opening, but to challenge the solid setup before white gets comfortable with slow pressure and a later f4, f5 attack. I play knight bd2, completing the standard London shell. Bishop on f4 solved early, pawns on c3, check d4, check e3 form the solid pyramid, and the knight supports e4 or a future knight e5 without asking me to memorize sharp theory. The teaching point is simple. In the London, I build the same reliable setup first, then choose between slow pressure on e5 and a later kingside plan with f4, f5. I play b6, a normal book move, because I want bishop b7 next and long diagonal pressure against white's center, especially e4. This is black's grown-up answer to the London shell. Don't chase the bishop, just develop smoothly and make white prove the central pyramid can expand. I play castle's kingside, a normal book move, because the London works best when I complete the setup first. Safe king, rook connected, and no drama in the center. Now my next ideas are pressure on e5 and eventually f4 and f5, but the teaching point is simple. Don't start attacking until the king is tucked away. I play bishop b7, developing the last queenside piece and putting the bishop on the long diagonal toward g2 and h1. Against the London pyramid with c3, d4, and e3, black's practical plan is simple too. Challenge the center with c5, develop smoothly, and make white prove that the solid setup can become active. I play bishop takes d6, a normal London decision. I remove black's active dark squared bishop before it can trade on g3 under favorable conditions. My central pyramid with c3, d4, and e3 stays solid, and I'm still aiming for slow pressure on e5 later. I play queen takes d6, the natural recapture. My queen on d6 centralizes and supports the important e5 break against white's solid London pyramid. White's setup is hard to crack, so I don't chase ghosts. I prepare clean central pressure and make white prove the e5 square belongs to him. I play knight e5, planting the knight on the London dream square. My c3, check d4, check 3 pyramid supports this outpost, and now I start squeezing black's center instead of memorizing theory. The teaching point is simple. In the London, I often win by slow pressure on e5 and then build a kingside plan with f4, f5, not by forcing tactics immediately. Here I'm answering the big London question. After I build the solid c3, d4, e3 pyramid and plant pressure on e5, how do I turn that into something concrete? The theme is king safety versus structure. I'm willing to commit the f-pawn because my pieces are already aimed at black's kingside. Black is not getting mated by force, but the engine-style truth is that white's play is coherent: space, outpost, pawn break, open lines. The punch to watch is how slow positional pressure becomes a real attack once the f-file and bishop diagonals start opening. I play rook fd8, and that's a strong move. I bring the rook to the file where white's London center is most vulnerable, especially the pawn on d4 and the knight on e5. The point is that my queen on d6, rook on d8, and knight on c6 now combine pressure on the center, so white's comfortable system setup is no longer just solid, It has to answer concrete pressure. I play f4, and this is the London growing teeth. The pawn covers e5 and g5, reinforces my knight on e5, and prepares f5 to crack open black's kingside. A strong engine would see equal material and no immediate tactic, but white has the easier plan. My knight on e5 is excellent, my central pyramid is solid, and black is being pushed into defensive moves. The key reply I'm watching for is knight e7, bringing another defender toward f5 and g6. If black does that, I still play f5 and accept that the position will open on my terms. What I expect next is exactly that structural shift. f5 exchanges, and then my bishop lands on f5, turning slow London pressure into a real kingside attack. I play knight e7, tucking the knight from c6 to e7 so it reinforces f5 and d5 while getting out of the way of white's central pressure. Black is solid materially, but white has the clearer plan. More space, a knight on e5, and the ready-made f4, f5 break. The punch I'm watching for is exactly f5. If white takes f5 and bishop takes f5, that bishop lands on f5 with tempo, and the London slow squeeze becomes a kingside attack. Next, I expect f5, and black has to decide whether to accept the structural damage or keep pieces cramped defending the dark squares. I play f5, and this is the London plan finally becoming concrete. The pawn attacks e6, controls g6, and prepares to open lines near the king rather than just look solid. A strong engine doesn't see this as a cheap attack. Material is level, but white has the better active pieces, especially the knight on e5 and bishop on d3, while black's king has to prove it can survive the opening of the f-file. The critical reply I'm watching for is takes f5, trying to diffuse everything immediately, and then I'm happy with bishop takes f5, putting the bishop on f5 where it controls key squares and keeps pressure on the king side. I play takes f5 because black has to challenge the f5 break before white simply rolls over the king side. Concretely, the pawn from e6 takes on f5, removes white's spearhead, and puts a pawn on f5, controlling e4 and g4. The engine reads this as structurally risky for black. I've solved the immediate space problem, but I've created doubled f-pawns and weakened e6, while white's bishop is ready to recapture on f5 and become a very active attacking piece. The punishing reply I'm watching for is bishop takes f5, and after that, white's London plan has done its job. Slow pressure on e5 has turned into active kingside pressure with the bishop on f5 aiming into black's camp. I play bishop takes f5 because the whole f4, f5 idea has done its job. I remove the f-pawn, plant the bishop on f5, and aim straight at h7, e6, and g6. A strong engine reads this as pleasant for white. I'm a pawn up, black's king has fewer defenders, and my bishop on f5 plus knight on e5 are more active than black's somewhat passive knight on e7. The defensive idea I'm watching for is knight takes f5 or takes d4, trying to trade off my active pieces and hit my center. If black delays, I expect moves like queen f3, queen h5, or rook f3, rook h3, turning the London's quiet setup into a direct kingside attack. I play knight g6, bringing the knight from e7 to g6 to challenge the knight on e5 and put a body in front of white's kingside pressure. Material is level, but a strong engine would prefer white's activity. The knight on e5 and bishop on f5 are better than black's cramped defenders, so I'm trying to trade pieces before f5, 5, f6 ideas become dangerous. The most punishing reply I'm watching for is bishop takes g6, forcing takes g6 or takes g6 and damaging my king cover. If that happens, I accept the structural ugliness to eliminate white's active bishop. Next, I expect white to choose between knight takes g6, bishop takes g6, or calmly queen g4, and the position is steering toward a classic London attack. White presses dark squares while black tries to survive by exchanges. A strong engine reads this as equal material, with white's pieces more active and black's king a little more uncomfortable, but black still has enough defenders. I'd call it roughly equal to a small white pull, around plus 0.4. Strategically, this does not refute the f4, f5 idea at all. It shows the London plan is playable and annoying because my bishop on f5 and knight on e5 turn slow setup moves into real kingside pressure. The takeaway is simple. I only push f5 when my center is solid and my pieces are ready to occupy the open squares. The warning sign is pushing it too early and letting black trade everything without pressure. Now I'm snapping back to the main line with that attacking pattern in mind. I played the clean classical London setup: d4, knight f3, bishop f4, e3, bishop d3, c3, knight b d2, and castling, the practical grown-up structure where I avoid heavy theory and get a solid central pyramid with c3, d4, and e3. The key moment was bishop takes d6, queen takes d6, where I traded my London bishop for black's active bishop and then planted knight e5, aiming at the classic London dream square. Black answered calmly with rook fd8, keeping pressure on the d-file so neither side overreached. The decisive factor was solidity. White had the usual e5 pressure and future 4f5 kingside ideas, while black developed naturally with c5, knight c6, b6, bishop b7, and equalized without creating weaknesses. Draw was a fair outcome because both sides followed the main plans and nobody gave the other a real target. The final position is exactly the London promise. I have the central pyramid with pawns on c3, d4, and e3. My knight on f3 and knight on d2 are ready to fight for e5, and the bishop developed outside the chain before it could become the bad bishop. Black has built a healthy classical setup with pawns on d5, e6, and often c5, so the next phase is not a tactical race, it is slow pressure, especially around e5 and eventually f4, f5 on the king side. From here, if you want to see London system Jobava London, that's its own short. That version brings the knight to c3 early and plays much sharper. If you want to see London system anti-London with queen b6, that's its own short, because black immediately attacks b2 and asks white to prove the setup is not automatic. And if you want to see London system King's Indian setup or London system Grunfeld setup, those are their own shorts too. Same London philosophy, but the pawn breaks and middle game plans change completely. That wraps today's lesson on AI teacher versus AI teacher, black side. The key takeaway is that under verifiable constraint, strong AI play becomes easier to trust when every decision is tied to a concrete pattern, a real position, and a clear consequence. Subscribe for more Oracle Trust Calibration content from the Mnemosyne Research Institute.